The cup hit the floor first. Coffee splashed across the polished tiles, steaming as it spread, and the sound of laughter followed almost instantly. "Watch where you're going, man," a voice said, sharp, amused, careless. The black man froze mid-step, his hand still hovering where the cup had slipped from his grip. He looked down at the spreading stain, then at the brown liquid dripping slowly from his jacket sleeve. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. That made them laugh harder. From behind the counter, two employees leaned toward each other. One smirked openly. The other shook his head like this was exactly what he expected. "Didn't even buy the coffee properly," the taller one said. "Probably thought it was free." The man bent down slowly, carefully, and picked up the fallen cup. His hands trembled, not from anger, but from restraint. Years of it. He had walked into the cafe less than 5 minutes earlier. It was early morning, the kind of hour when the place smelled like roasted beans and confidence. The kind of cafe where people spoke softly but judged loudly. Where the menu was written in cursive, and the prices dared you to question them. When the man had stepped inside, conversation hadn't stopped, but it had shifted. Eyes had followed him. He wore a plain jacket, clean but old. His shoes were scuffed, but polished out of habit. His hair was gray at the edges. Nothing about him screamed trouble. Nothing about him screamed wealth either. That was enough. He had waited patiently in line while a woman ahead of him ordered something with foam, drizzle, and a name longer than the receipt. When it was his turn, he smiled. "Good morning," he said. "Just a black coffee, please." The cashier didn't smile back. "What size?" she asked, already sighing. "Medium is fine." She rang it up slowly, then slid the card machine toward him without looking. He paid. No problem. No argument. No mistake. Still, the looks didn't stop. "Sit over there," one of the workers said, pointing to a small table near the wall, far from the windows. He nodded and walked over, careful not to draw attention. He sat down and placed his hands on the table, fingers interlocked. He didn't pull out a phone. He didn't fidget. He just waited. That was when the whispers started. "Why is he sitting there?" the taller worker muttered. "Probably waiting for someone to buy him breakfast," the other replied. The cashier glanced over and leaned in. "Manager hates it when they linger." "He paid, didn't he?" the taller one said. "For now." They laughed quietly. When the coffee was finally ready, the shorter worker picked it up, but instead of calling out the order, he walked straight toward the man's table. Too straight. Too fast. The bump looked accidental if you didn't want to see it. The cup tipped. Coffee spilled. And the moment froze just long enough for the damage to be done. Now, as the man stood holding the empty cup, the taller worker crossed his arms. "You need to be more careful," he said. "This isn't a shelter." The man opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I apologize," he said softly. "I'll clean it." He reached for napkins from the dispenser nearby. "You don't need to clean it," the cashier said loudly. "You need to leave. You're making customers uncomfortable." The man looked around. No one met his eyes. A woman stirred her drink and stared into it like it held answers. A man by the window pretended to be deeply invested in his phone. Someone shifted in their seat, then looked away. The man nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "I'll go." He dabbed at his jacket one last time, folded the napkins carefully, and stood. That should have been the end of it. But the taller worker stepped in front of him. "You're not leaving like that," he said. "You spilled coffee everywhere. That costs money." The man looked up at him for the first time fully. "I'll pay for it," he said. The worker scoffed. "With what?" The room went quiet. If you're still watching, pause for just a second, because stories like this don't happen because of loud hate. They happen because of quiet confidence. Because people believe they can get away with it. If you want stories that expose moments like this, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments what you think should happen next. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Leather. Worn. Full. He opened it calmly and slid a bill onto the table. That should cover it, he said. The cashier blinked. The taller worker hesitated, then picked up the bill and checked it like it might be fake. It wasn't. Still, his tone didn't change. Take your stuff and go, he said. And don't come back. The man nodded once. As he turned toward the door, the bell above it chimed. Another customer walked in. Then another sound followed. A familiar one. The deep click of dress shoes against tile. The owner had arrived. And everything was about to get worse, for the wrong people. The owner's eyes scanned the room. He noticed the spilled coffee, the damp napkins, the tense staff. Then he saw him, standing near the exit, calm, composed, almost invisible to everyone else until this moment. Dad, the owner said softly, stepping forward. The room froze. No one moved. No one dared breathe too loudly. The taller worker opened his mouth, then closed it again. The shorter one wiped sweat from his forehead. Even the customers stopped fidgeting. The man turned slowly. His eyes met the owner's, and for the first time, there was recognition. Not surprise. Not anger. Recognition. Yes, he said quietly. It's me. The owner's voice carried over the quiet cafe, calm but firm. Are you okay? Panic spread like wildfire. The taller worker stepped back, knocking over a chair. Coffee still stained the floor, but now it was no longer the man who looked embarrassed. Dad, one of the workers stammered. You own this place. The man shook his head slightly. I helped build it. Years ago. Before any of you were here. The cashier's hands trembled. She clutched the register like it could save her from the truth. I didn't know. No one did, the man said softly, his voice steady. But now you do. The owner turned fully toward the employees. Explain what happened here. The taller worker tried to speak first. He spilled the coffee, and... The owner held up a hand. Silence fell. Every second stretched. Then he said quietly, I saw everything. The coffee didn't just spill. You did this intentionally. Is that correct? The room went cold. No one answered. The man stepped forward slightly, still calm, still dignified. I didn't come here to make trouble. I came for coffee, as I always do. The shorter worker's voice cracked. He didn't belong here. You think that gives you the right? The owner asked, voice now rising just enough to cut through the tension. You think it gives you the right to humiliate someone you don't know, someone who doesn't owe you anything? A customer in the corner whispered, barely audibly, wow. The taller worker's knees shook. I didn't know, he's your father. Yes, the owner said simply. And he is more than just my father. He is the reason this cafe exists. Silence again. The man looked around the cafe, then directly at the workers who had tried to make him disappear. I could have reacted differently. Anger, yelling, maybe even leaving with resentment. But I chose to be patient. I chose to wait. I chose to hope that right would be done, even quietly. The taller worker swallowed hard. I. The owner's gaze hardened. You will apologize. Not just to him, but to anyone here who witnessed your behavior. And after that, you'll face the consequences for what you've done. The cashier bit her lip, her mind racing. I understand, she whispered. The man nodded once, still calm, still steady. I just want my coffee. A brief chuckle ran through the cafe. Tension slightly released, but the lesson hung heavy in the air. Let's clean this up, the owner said. And then we talk about what kind of place this is supposed to be. As the employees scrambled to correct their mistake, the man took his jacket off, folded it neatly, and draped it over his arm. He walked toward the counter, paid for his coffee again, just to set the record straight, and turned toward a window seat. A young woman, watching silently, leaned forward. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was like this. He smiled gently. You didn't have to. Just remember what you saw. And let it matter. The owner came back to stand beside him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. I promise, Dad, this won't happen again. Not here. Not ever. The man nodded. Good. That's all I ask. At that moment, the employees realized that it wasn't just a personal lesson. It was public. Every customer had seen the quiet dignity, the humiliation they had caused, the authority of the son, and the patience of the man they thought they could mock. The taller worker looked down, shame washing over him. I'm sorry. I didn't. The shorter worker followed, voice trembling. I didn't mean. You meant it enough, the man interrupted softly. That's enough for now. But words must be backed by action. You'll need to prove it. The cashier nodded slowly. We'll do better. Good, the man said. Start now. He took a slow sip of his coffee. Warm. Bitter. Perfect. He didn't rush. He had waited long enough for the lesson to sink in. If you're still watching, pause here and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment what you would have done in his place. Stories like this teach more than anger, they teach patience, dignity, and the quiet power of waiting for the right moment. The owner whispered something to his father, a small joke, and they shared a quiet laugh. The cafe, which had moments ago been tense with fear and cruelty, now breathed relief, even hope. Yet, the memory of what had happened lingered. It wasn't just about coffee or spilled liquid. It was about assumptions, prejudice, and the consequences of thinking someone is invisible. Let's make sure this place is better than that, the man said, glancing around. For everyone. A young man in the corner nodded. Yes, for everyone. The employees looked at each other, understanding for the first time that humiliation and racism were visible, even if unspoken. Actions have a way of echoing, even in small cafes. The owner stepped back, giving his father space. Want to sit anywhere? He asked. The man shook his head. No, standing is fine. I'll watch for a while. Make sure the lesson sticks. A laugh ran quietly through the room, not mocking, but relieved, human. The man finally left, walking slowly out the door. The morning sunlight hit his face. He didn't rush. He didn't look back. But everyone else would remember. And for the viewers at home, this isn't just a story. It's a reminder, dignity and patience are stronger than fear and prejudice. If you're still here, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment sharing what lesson you're taking from this story. Every story like this helps remind people that calm courage is more powerful than loud hate. The cafe seemed to breathe differently after that morning. The spilled coffee, once a symbol of humiliation, now felt like a marker of change. Customers sipped their drinks quietly, some glancing toward the man who had quietly reshaped their understanding of respect. The employees, still pale, worked with nervous efficiency. Each movement was measured, careful, every action a reminder of their failure. The taller worker kept glancing at the door as if expecting a second wave of judgment, but there was none. Only the weight of accountability. Do you want me to call someone? The cashier asked timidly, her voice breaking the silence. The man shook his head. No one needs to know. The lesson is enough if it's learned. The owner came to stand beside him, placing a hand gently on his father's shoulder. "They'll learn," he said softly. "It may take time, but they will." "I hope so," the man replied. But hope is useless without action. One of the employees, the shorter one, finally spoke. I never thought someone like you. I didn't think you were our owner's father." The man gave a slow, deliberate smile. "That's the problem, isn't it? You assumed based on how I look. You assumed I didn't belong. And that assumption made you cruel." The room went silent again, heavier this time, not with fear, but with the weight of truth. The taller worker swallowed hard, his face flushed. I want to apologize," he stammered. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know who you were, or. I'm sorry." The man's eyes softened slightly, though his voice remained steady. "Apologies are only the beginning. Change must follow. Words alone aren't enough." Another pause. The cashier nodded in agreement, swallowing back her shame. We'll do better. We'll treat everyone the same." "Good," the man said, taking a measured sip of his coffee. "Start now. Don't wait for someone to remind you. Don't wait for consequences. Just, do better." The owner watched quietly. "I think this will stick," he said softly, almost to himself. The man looked around the cafe, eyes lingering on the small acts, the careful way the barista now handled cups, the way the employees avoided whispering, the way customers unconsciously relaxed, no longer feeling tension in the air. "It's small," he said quietly, "but small acts become habits. Habits become culture." He stood, folding his jacket over his arm, ready to leave. "I don't need recognition. I just need respect, for everyone." Before he stepped toward the door, he paused. His gaze swept the room once more, and then he turned back to the camera, as if acknowledging those watching at home, if only in spirit. "Remember this," he said quietly. "Your actions are seen, even when you think no one is watching. And sometimes, someone important is watching." He left. The bell above the door chimed as it had when he entered, but this time, the sound carried weight. It was a marker of accountability. A symbol that dignity can't be mocked without consequence. The employees exhaled collectively, tension slowly leaving their bodies. They exchanged looks, part relief, part disbelief. The taller worker finally muttered, "I never thought." The cashier interrupted, voice shaking but resolute. "We can't undo what we did. But we can do better. We have to." The man's words echoed quietly in their minds. Do better. Start now. Outside, the morning sun had climbed higher. The man walked slowly down the street, coffee in hand, jacket folded neatly over his arm. People passed him, unaware of the morning's events. They didn't see the dignity, the patience, or the quiet strength. But that was the point. He didn't need them to see. His lesson wasn't for applause, it was for change. Inside, the cafe began to feel lighter. Customers smiled more freely. Conversations flowed. The smell of coffee still lingered, but so did the memory of what had happened. "Do you think it will last?" one of the employees whispered to another. The taller worker nodded slowly. "I think so. It has to. We saw it. We felt it. We can't go back." The cashier added softly, "And I think he changed more than just us. Everyone in here, everyone who saw, it matters." The owner approached his father, a quiet pride in his eyes. "You handled that better than I could have." The man smiled faintly. "I've had practice waiting. Sometimes patience is the strongest response. Sometimes dignity is the loudest voice." He picked up his coffee, finished the last sip, and looked around the cafe one final time. "Let this place reflect respect," he said. For every person who walks in here, for every customer, for every employee. Let it be a place where assumptions don't define worth. The owner nodded, eyes moist. It will. I promise. And as the man finally walked out onto the street, the camera, or in the minds of viewers, lingered on the employees and the remaining customers. Each person had seen something they couldn't unsee. Something that would shape their actions, consciously or unconsciously, for years to come. For viewers at home, the story carried a simple, unshakable truth: dignity isn't loud. Patience isn't weak. And sometimes, silence is stronger than shouting. If you're still watching, pause for just a moment to hit like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Share this story to remind others that quiet courage can change everything. The man continued down the street, blending into the morning crowd. But the lesson lingered. For the employees. For the customers. For anyone who had assumed they could get away with disrespect. And for those watching this story unfold now, the message is clear: the quiet, patient, dignified approach often reveals the loudest truth. The owner closed the cafe door behind him, watching his father disappear into the street. He whispered to himself, "This is what integrity looks like. This is what patience teaches." A final glance at the spilled coffee now cleaned up, the tiles gleaming, the lesson clear: sometimes, all it takes is one person to stand quietly, hold their dignity, and wait for the right moment to be recognized. Days passed, but the memory of that morning didn't fade for anyone in the cafe. Customers who had witnessed the incident returned, some hesitant, some curious, all carrying the weight of what they had seen. They watched the employees with sharper eyes, noting the way they moved, spoke, and served. The lesson had extended beyond the immediate participants. The taller worker caught himself hesitating over a simple task, remembering the way his own assumptions had led to humiliation. He apologized quietly to a customer he had snapped at the day before, a small gesture, but one he had never considered before. The cashier, too, began observing every interaction. No longer was she just counting cups and taking orders, she was listening, noticing, and learning. The man's quiet words, "Do better. Start now," echoed in her mind constantly. One afternoon, the owner walked in to find the employees huddled near the counter, quietly discussing how to improve the service. He smiled. "Looks like the lesson stuck," he said softly. The man, his father, was seated near the window. A newspaper lay folded beside him. He sipped his coffee slowly, taking in the scene around him. Customers moved freely, employees smiled with authenticity, and the cafe felt lighter, freer, safer. He nodded slightly. This was the impact he had hoped for. A young man at the counter approached nervously. "Sir. I just wanted to say, what you did that morning, it was incredible. I've never seen anyone handle that situation so calmly. It gave me hope." The man looked up, eyes steady and kind. Hope is only powerful when it guides action. Remember what you saw. Carry it forward. The young man nodded, visibly moved, and walked away. Meanwhile, the employees continued to adjust. Mistakes happened, of course, but now they approached each one differently, with accountability, with honesty, with awareness of the consequences that came from neglecting dignity. The taller worker paused behind the counter, watching a new customer walk in. For the first time, he saw a person, not an assumption. "Welcome," he said genuinely. The customer smiled. The worker felt an unfamiliar warmth, a small victory over the arrogance he had once harbored. The cashier, too, now greeted each person with a smile, making eye contact, listening, noticing. She even caught herself correcting the taller worker once, gently, in a friendly way, when he nearly assumed the customer's intentions. "Remember what we learned," she whispered. He nodded, grateful for the reminder. The man, the quiet center of this transformation, continued visiting the cafe regularly, though he never sought attention. He took his coffee and observed. He watched people interact. He watched assumptions fade, replaced by small acts of respect and decency. And every time he left, he carried the quiet satisfaction of knowing that his patience, dignity, and restraint had left a mark deeper than any coffee stain ever could. One evening, as the sun began to set, he walked through the door and noticed a small crowd gathered outside the cafe. Curious, he approached, and the owner came out to meet him. "Dad, I wanted you to see this," the owner said. "People have been sharing their experiences online, talking about the story, how dignity, patience, and standing firm against injustice can inspire others." The man smiled faintly. "I never sought recognition. But if it teaches even one person," he trailed off, letting the thought linger. "Even hundreds of people," the owner said. "Your story is spreading. People are learning from it. We're making a difference." The man nodded, eyes glinting with quiet pride. "Then it's enough. That's all I ever wanted." Back inside the cafe, the employees paused their work to watch the news of the story spreading online. Articles, posts, and videos chronicled the incident, praising the man's calm dignity and the son's leadership. Many viewers expressed outrage at the employee's initial behavior, but also hoped that people could change. This is unbelievable," the cashier whispered. "I can't believe it all started with spilled coffee." The taller worker nodded. "I can't believe how much we underestimated him, underestimated patience, dignity, and the power of doing the right thing." The man finished his coffee, placed the cup down carefully, and stood. He looked at the employees, at the customers, at the owner. "Remember this," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. "Every action has a consequence. Every word matters. Every assumption you make can hurt someone. Choose carefully. Act with respect. Start now." He turned to leave, but paused, glancing back with a small smile. "And to everyone watching this story," he said, as if speaking directly to viewers, "remember, dignity and patience are stronger than hate and assumptions. If you've learned something here, share it. Comment below what lesson you're taking with you. Like the video, subscribe, and help remind the world that quiet courage changes lives." With that, he stepped outside into the fading sunlight. The cafe, the employees, the customers, all had changed. The spilled coffee, the humiliation, the assumptions, it had become more than an incident. It had become a lesson, a moment of transformation, a reminder that courage and patience often speak louder than shouting ever could. The owner stood behind the counter, looking out the window. "I hope everyone carries this forward," he said quietly. "I know they will," his father replied. "Patience has a way of being noticed. Dignity has a way of teaching." The taller worker took a deep breath. "I'll never forget this morning," he said. "Never. I'll be better. I promise." The cashier nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Me too. We'll all do better." And outside, the man disappeared into the city, blending into the crowd. But the impact of his quiet strength, the lesson of his patience, and the power of his dignity remained. The story of spilled coffee and humiliation had become a story of hope, respect, and transformation, one that would resonate far beyond the walls of that small cafe. For the viewers at home, it was a clear message: courage does not always shout. Sometimes, it waits. Sometimes, it sips coffee, watches, and lets quiet dignity reveal the loudest truths. And for anyone watching, remember, like, comment, and subscribe to share this story. Every time you do, you help remind the world that patience, respect, and quiet courage have the power to change hearts, and change lives.